Good evening. Tonight, MPT presents a 90-minute special on the complex and evolving issue of race in America. 1 hour from now, we will open up the phones to get your thoughts. First, our rebroadcast of a program that was co-produced by WUSA 9 and The Washington Post. Race, an honest conversation with Bruce Johnson, is next on MPT.
The following program is a special presentation by WUSA 9 and The Washington Post.
We need to talk about this.
I don't feel safe in America anymore.
I do feel like we do spend an awful lot of money and time and resources on the folks that aren't trying to help themselves.
When it comes to race relations, we just aren't there yet. Anybody think race relations are pretty good right now, about where they should be? Bad few.
We put a man on the moon, but we still can't get along.
Why the looting? Why the violence?
I'm angry about the way we're being viewed as not people.
A recent poll finds most Americans believe race relations in this country are bad. More than 50% of whites think so. More than 2/3 of blacks feel this way.
People are angry.
Where we go from here, I don't know.
We're saying there's one race, the human race.
We've been together and apart for more than 239 years, part of this great experiment for the United States of America. There have been incredible gains on many fronts.
Change has come to America.
And yet we still see dramatic and dangerous instances of racial discord.
The parishioners had Bibles.
Even hatred.
Dylan Roof had his .45 caliber Glock pistol.
The pain that this causes us all and the loss this is to the entire society.
It's beyond my comprehension how anybody could do the act that this young man did.
A poll shows 60% of white people are uncomfortable discussing race with somebody of another race. The number jumps to 71% for blacks.
Give me a hug. That's what we need to do.
But we need to talk about this, race, an honest conversation. Hello, I'm Bruce Johnson, and thank you for joining us out there. Let's get right to it. Let's get started. Why are we not talking about race, white and black people for starters? Are we afraid of anything? Let's begin with my colleague from the Washington Post, Clinton Yates.
Bruce, I don't think that people are necessarily as afraid of things as they are misinformed. The average American has no idea what the actual history of discrimination is in this nation. You can go all the way back to the native peoples, you go back through black people, you go back through Asian Americans, you go back through Latinos to this point now. If people were more informed about the realities of their generational histories, I don't think they would be as afraid to talk about things because they would understand that not everything is a personal indictment. It's a matter of discussing how we've come along as people together and what this nation is now.
Okay, pass that mic to Lenny Steinhorn, professor at American University. You know, a lot of people out there, white in particular, like, I had nothing to do with what happened all those hundreds of years ago. Why am I being blamed? Why am I being targeted?
Well, nobody's being blamed. All of these injustices, all of the discrimination, it's coded in, it's coiled in to our present day. You can't talk about our present day without the context of our history. We have been in what I call the 51st state of America on race, the state of denial. And it's time that we get out of denial and talk about these issues that have a real impact on people's lives.
Marjorie Lightman, an advisory neighborhood commissioner in the district. You know, a lot of people talk about this stuff over the kitchen table, but they won't talk about it to somebody who doesn't look like them, somebody who won't protect them, you know, from the repercussions.
It's hard. It's hard to talk about race. And we should remember that it's hard, that we're doing something hard. We're overcoming generations and generations of the ways we've been taught not to do something when we step out and do something. But we also have to remember that race is not a single topic. It's made up of many topics. And one of its big subdivisions is gender. So race and gender do go together in my mind.
Okay, everybody take a look at this graphic that we've prepared for you. Take a look at this. CBS News, New York Times poll asking if President Barack Obama has brought whites and blacks closer together. Some of these results might surprise you. 15% of Americans polled say yes. 47% say there has been no difference. And get this, 34% of respondents say we are further apart. Let's pass the mic to Ben Jones. Ben, what's the problem here? Why are we apart? You're a former Democratic congressman from the state of Georgia. Why are we further apart?
I think it has to do with inculcated urban tensions. which are in fact part of a history of segregation in the South and de facto segregation in the North, which is something we don't talk about a lot. The president is just a victim of circumstances. I don't think that he's led on race. I don't think he's really bringing people together. He's got a lot of other things to be worried about. And these occasions recently, particularly in these past few months, have divided the nation beyond his control to bring it together.
Got it. Ben, let me ask you this. Okay, you don't think the president, pass that mic back to the row behind you. You don't think the president has led on race. Scott, back in 2009, 97% of the African Americans who went to the polls voted for Barack Obama. They voted in a higher percentage than whites for the first time in history for Barack Obama. Were they expecting too much? What did they want from this president?
Well, I think they wanted unification, they wanted leadership, and they wanted a better community for their community. That being said, the reality is that Barack Obama's election was powerful and an excellent opportunity to address the race question. But I think black folks and white folks, because of his election, stopped working on it or working towards it. So I think African Americans got comfortable thinking life was going to get better on its own, and white Americans said, listen, we're getting rid of the guilt because we got a black president.
Okay, pass that mic to Noel. I'm going to venture to say that if Barack Obama had portrayed himself as the African American that blacks wanted to see, he would not have gotten elected. A lot of white people would not have voted for him. They would have been uncomfortable electing this man with a black agenda, right or wrong?
I would actually completely agree with you. I think that Barack Obama did a really good job of positioning himself in the middle on race issues, and that's caused some problems because it's allowed race riots and race issues to sort of rise. And we haven't been having this conversation that is necessary, right? And as we see with all the brutality that's been happening, it continues.
Okay, pass that mic over to Chris. Go ahead, Scott. You got the mic.
Okay. That's true. But Barack Obama doesn't have to have a language or a speech to support black causes. I'm more concerned about his actions. What is his legacy of leadership in connection to black communities across this country? That's what it should be judged upon, and that's where I think he's had his challenges, because I don't think he's done enough.
Okay, let's go here. Chris, you want conservative Republican? That's okay. It's quite okay.
Republicans probably better.
Okay, Barack Obama got 43% of the white vote in the general election, okay, which means an awful lot of people, majority of the whites, did not vote for him. How are white people viewing Barack Obama now?
Well, I can hardly speak for white folks, and they're white Democrats, and the Democrats are going to tend to vote for the Democrat running for office. I think the Republican Party faces a great dilemma here right now. The party is trying to do outreach to certain communities, but there are certain folks who don't care about reaching out to those communities because they think those communities can't be won over. It's a very complicated process, but part of the reason why Barack Obama is opposition to him is seen as racist is because of his race, when in fact it's because he's a member of the other party, and we live in a very partisan society right now.
I got to jump in.
Go ahead.
I really think we're overanalyzing this incredibly. When you have the same problems with females and having glass ceilings as you do with race and having glass ceilings, and it's because we're afraid to lose power. So whoever's afraid to lose power is going to create things where they make it difficult and they speak down. So Barack Obama has been a very good president, and that's the reason why this has come out. They wanted to have a problem with him. They wanted to say he didn't do a good job, but he's done an absolutely phenomenal job. And now we have to realize that maybe a black man can be a president, maybe a black man can lead, and maybe they are equal. So as the white man continues to lose power, you're going to entrench yourself down.
Yeah, and I would
hold on a second. I'm going to come back here. Anybody back here want to join in on this?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay. So give me your name.
Yeah, my name is Brandon Cooper. Law student at University of Maryland. I'm also VP of 100 Black Men in Prince George's County.
Okay.
And this to the poll question, I think it's a false choice, whether Obama has done good things or bad things, race relations. I'm with the 47% of people who think it's not a factor. I think it's more than one person. There's a lot of issues going back to history that need to be dealt with, and it's not going to be solved or helped by one person.
Who was writing all those articles saying that it's the end of racism, the election of Barack Obama? We've reached the point that we've been trying to get to for all these years. Who wrote that? Who said that? Who bought into that? Who thought all of this that we're talking about tonight and going to be talking about was behind us? Anybody? Show of hands. Who thought those days were over? Nobody. You didn't believe it. Okay.
Well, certainly, Bruce. Jonathan Hutto, an activist organizer in Prince George's County. I certainly didn't buy into it, and I certainly voted for Barack Obama. But I think the question and discussion not only should be about race relations, but it should be about racial justice. You know, too often we talk about racism in this country as a conversation or a discussion. The issue that we really have from decades on, the summer of '67, the parallel to the summer of 2015, is we're not getting enough justice. For the first time, we're starting to see some officers get locked up. That's a good thing, and I want to see that type of accountability continue.
We're going to take that up in the next segment. Let me ask you this, okay? Barack Obama is, past the halfway point, I think, his second term. Let me ask you this, and we've got people in the streets marching, chanting, Black Lives Matter. Does that offend anybody, the slogan, Black Lives Matter? You're offended by that, all the way in the back? Step up this way. Come all the way up here. Tell me who you are and why you have a problem with the slogan, Black Lives Matter.
My name is Dan McHugh, and I'm from Montgomery County, Maryland, and all lives matter, not just black lives, all lives matter. And if you can't have an honest conversation about Black Lives Mattering, when over 1,600 people this year have been shot in Chicago, and over 50% of the shooting victims are African-American males. Just yesterday, 12 people were shot in Chicago. And you know what? That doesn't make national headlines, and it's hardly
Can somebody respond to him why Black Lives slogan is relevant?
My name is Kimry Hughes, and I'm an activist here in Washington, D.C. Black Lives Matter because when you look at what's happening, and I'll follow up with what Jonathan Hutto said, there's not been black justice. And right now, black folks are under attack. And while you may have 6 children, and you can love your children equally, but you have to love them adequately. And we have to put adequate attention to the issues that are in our black community.
Trust me, I got it. Stay with me. Stay with me on this, on topic here. Black Lives Matter. Let's address that. Reverend? He's got a problem with the slogan, Black Lives Matter.
Dexter Nuttall, pastor of New Bethel Baptist Church in D.C. I would agree that all lives matter. However, I think you have to understand the source that sentiment comes from, which is a source of frustration and anger that goes back to a point in history and time where if you had literally a drop of blood, you were considered not to be equal. And racism was then condoned. So it's woven into the fabric of who we are as a country. That's one of the cornerstone foundations, and that's something that we need to come to grips with.
Here's what I took from it when I first heard Black Lives Matter. Here's what I took for it. It's understood that white lives matter. What they were trying to draw attention to, hey, don't forget us, Black Lives Matter too. Am I misunderstanding that?
No, there's a certain amount of privilege that comes with saying all lives matter over Black Lives Matter. I saw what I believe was it was a editorial cartoon where the equivalency they did of Black Lives Matter to all lives matter was it was an image of a black child saying Black Lives Matter, and there was a white hand over that mouth saying all lives matter. And the idea is that they're not mutually exclusive. The idea is that if it were not necessary to say as much to begin with, then the notion of all lives matter wouldn't, it wouldn't be an issue at all. I just want to address another quick point, by the way, is I would caution to equate glass ceilings for black people and women. Black men were allowed to vote in this country before any woman was, and so you've got to understand that male privilege is the first privilege. So it's a tough comparison there, and I just wanted to make sure that we got that out there because I didn't want to go too far with
Reverend Lamar, we haven't heard from you.
Anyone who deals with the history of this nation, not the hagiography and propaganda that we get in schools, but the real history of this country, has to know that from the very beginning, black lives were commodified. Black lives did not matter. They mattered only in as much as they produced wealth for those who owned black people. And it has only been a generation. My own father, I'm 40 years old. My father and mother went to segregated schools. America has only tried to remedy this in the law 1 generation ago. And so to separate from the true history of this nation, this is, I often call it, this is the United States of amnesia. We're not willing to deal with the true history and documentary evidence that got us to where we are.
Dana Williams.
Well, there were a couple
Howard
of things.
University Department Chair.
Thank you. There are a couple of things that I wanted to mention to pick up the interesting point about Frederick Douglass, for instance, or the point that you were making about the women and race. The point where we see the break with Frederick Douglass, for instance, with liberal whites in the North, for instance, is precisely over this issue of gender, where white women in particular, were saying we want the vote over black men. if we don't have the vote, certainly black men can't have the vote. So the historical significance of it, I think, is very important. And then just to reiterate the point that you were making, the default position in this country has always been white. So to put something in front of it means that you're moving out of that default position. Black Lives Matters is problematic in some ways because we still have to say that, because the default position fundamentally is still white.
Okay, I need you guys to look at this graphic here, okay? Because a lot of people think jobs, underscore a lot of this. If the economy were better and people were doing better, we wouldn't have this problem of I'm losing, so you must be winning at my expense. So take a look at these unemployment numbers today versus 2009, okay, when President Obama first took office. And again, not blaming the president, we just need a reference point. According to the Labor Department, the black unemployment rate today is 9% versus 13% in 2009. So it has come down, okay? For Hispanics, the number is almost 7% today compared to 10% 2009, so it's gotten better. For whites today, unemployment rate is 4.6% compared to 7% in 2009. Asians stand at 4% today compared to 6% 6 years ago. Point being, it's gotten better for everybody. The economy has gotten better. We can all argue, we're not making as much, we're having to produce more, but it has gotten better. Chris, I want to come back to you because I want you to talk about, we were talking on the phone, you were talking about this group of white men, blue-collar white men out there who feel as though they've been cheated, they've been left out, nobody's speaking for them. Who are we talking about?
Well, first of all, in terms of like white privilege.
No, we're going to get to white privilege later. Well, we want to talk about the employment. We want to talk about the employment.
Because a lot of blue-collar folks, white America, in rural areas in particular, they don't feel like they have any real privilege. They find it hard to get a job, and they're worried about jobs going overseas and so forth. And so
immigration is a big issue with them too. They think other people are taking their jobs or jobs that they should be entitled to.
And so it's unfortunate. So and the fact that we have a black president is playing into some anxiety. Folks feel like, hey, my situation hasn't improved, and meanwhile there are those people over there who are agitating for their rights as well. So there's a bit of dissonance there. But in terms of so what you have, whenever you have a situation where the economy is bad and where people feel like they're left out of the economy, well, guess what? People are going to find people to blame, and then people will start blaming people coming across the border, and they'll be blaming people such as black folks.
Oh, okay, fine. Now, hold on a second. We can come back to this. We can come back to this. All right. Moving on. You've no doubt seen the images on television that have been captured on cell phone and police cameras, and mostly African-American males who've ended up dead in these incidents with police. Ferguson, New York, Cleveland, the University of Cincinnati police officer, North Charleston, and more and more and more. And you've seen how these cases have ended up, or those that are pending. Take a look at this segment from Baltimore.
These officers did nothing wrong.
We are disappointed in the apparent rush to judgment.
We want murder for all 6 of them.
Black Lives Matter! I hope that as we move forward with this case, everyone will respect due process.
These police is not bringing no peace in our streets.
West Baltimore is often referred to as the other Baltimore. It's not on the tourist map.
Baltimore's still alive!
Baltimore's still alive!
People here feel left out.
Excuse my French. F the leaders. The leaders is us right here.
They don't like Baltimore police here.
They look at us as a whole, so we have to categorize them as a whole.
They say they have good reason, even before Freddie Gray died in police custody.
They designated the area a high crime area. When they do that, you know what happens? They're now able to stop anybody for any reason they so choose.
This is not something that's solved in any one day. It's something that involves a lot of work, a lot of good people, more drug treatment, intervening in the lives of young kids, doing a better job of policing our own police.
I kid you not. If you have not been to West Baltimore, you do not know that part of West Baltimore. People had me go back and watch The Wire to get a better sense of what's going on there. And I was there covering, the disturbances there. I'm going to go to this gentleman over here, Michael Wood, again, who is a former Baltimore City police officer. What is zero tolerance? I understand that's what police in Baltimore were operating under. There's community policing, and then there's this zero tolerance policing. They were doing it in New York under Rudy Giuliani. What was it in Baltimore? What did it mean to you as a cop on the street?
I had zero tolerance under Martin O'Malley. But what we're talking about in Freddie Gray isn't zero tolerance. We don't have that system anymore, at least not officially. What you have in Freddie Gray is an instance where you're going after somebody that is walking the streets and supposedly has a knife in his pocket that's spring assistant, and the cops stop him, go into his pocket, end up arresting him, throwing him into a metal box, tossing him around the streets, and ending up in his death. And then they will stand there on TV and they will say, we did nothing wrong. That is the epitome of white privilege, because there's not a chance that any of your kids end up in that situation.
I want you to go back and tell me your experiences on the streets as a Baltimore cop. What was going on? The community gives us one story. Baltimore FOP gives us another story.
Cops do what you want. We do what we want because we have overcriminalization. So
what does that mean? You do what you want.
We have, in a situation where you have like Sandra Bland, where no matter what happens, the police can justify detaining you for a period of time. So what that ends up enabling you to do is not necessarily look for the crime, but look for your chosen suspect, because everyone's a criminal when you have laws that make everyone do things that are illegal.
Well, who was your chosen suspect?
In Baltimore, it's black males 16 to 24 years old, because we have this false ideology that that's the people that commit crimes. But those are the people that do commit crimes in our records, but that's because that's who we're looking at. So we create this cycle where we're arresting people for essentially because we arrested them previously.
The FOP would say, well, most of the suspects, most of the crime is committed by the young African Americans that you and I can profile. How would you respond to that?
It's mostly committed by them when we look at them. Because, for instance, if we go out, we know that all the races carry drugs on them at about the same rate. Then if you were to stop somebody, anybody, to look for drugs, you would pretty much find drugs on the races at the same rate. But we arrest more black males in the city for that, or pretty much anywhere, because that's who we're looking for. It is a false narrative if somebody says we're looking for crime. I will call them a liar.
From a former cop. What about reform? Wait a minute. What about reform? I mean, can you reform the police? How do you begin to reform the Baltimore Police Department and other police departments that might be similar?
Yeah, if anyone's heard me speak before, I'm really focused on getting the money out of politics. I don't think we can get politicians that are going to do what the people want. And for the people to be in charge, we need politicians who are going to make these hard decisions. I don't know how we can get that when they're supported by donors.
Okay, let's go to Scott Bolden over here. You represented, a lot of people opposite, the FOP. Weigh in on this.
I've represented defendants on both sides. The reality is, though, whether it's Baltimore or any other urban police department or small one, we got to get rid of this us versus them mentality. I agree with the officer over here, but it goes beyond that. Us versus them. Right. That is the thin blue line. That is on the tapes you're hearing and seeing where there's been a shooting, the other police officer walks up and says, I got your back. Says, don't say anything. They've got body cameras. But this us versus them mentality. When I was in law enforcement, we called black and brown defendants along the halls of the DA's office and the police departments and the ride-outs, mopes, perps, animals, dogs, okay, regularly. Now, if you do that internally and then you go patrol the streets externally, I got to tell you, you're going to think of those individuals the same way. It's not fair, and I can't paint a broad brush, but I got to tell you, this us versus them mentality is a problem. Secondly, who are the police officers that we're choosing? In the last 6 months where these shootings have taken place, my goodness gracious. I mean, the acts they've done with a badge and a gun, we've got to do a better of assessing who we're giving a gun and badge to. And that's that's a big way, a great way you begin to clean up these police departments.
I don't know if you've read the interview that the officer involved in the Ferguson shooting, Michael Brown, has done with the newspaper magazine. He says he wanted to work in the black neighborhoods. That's where the fun was. To go back to your point, you can make your own rules there. That's what he said, okay?
We don't know what biases and prejudices people are bringing to the street with regard to law enforcement officers. And so what we're talking about is leadership. And so last night, we had a Republican presidential candidate debate. And there was more time spent on the NWA movie commercial after a 30-second segment in which this issue and the issue of race relations was not discussed. That's the problem. We have a cancer. Organisms are killed from the inside out. And that's what's taking place in our country.
Mm-hmm. Young man right here in the front. Go.
Hello, my name is Jawan Chain. I attend Morehouse College. I believe that we have to wait. We can't wait for white people to fix our communities. I believe that our community organizers in the church and our politicians need to start working together now so that 30, 40 years from now, we'll have stronger relations within our community, because that's the only way that black people will advance. And I don't believe it is something that we can truly wait for another race or another culture to fix for us.
The young lady right here.
Hi, I'm Olivia Brand, and I'm from Baltimore City and a student of University of Maryland, and I would like to completely agree, because when I saw what happened in Baltimore, I didn't see that as, you know, I saw that as someone being killed in my home, a family member, someone from Baltimore City. I grew up Park Heights, where everyone was so focused on the CVS burning, but you can't be focused that a life was taken. And I was so shocked that my Caucasian white friends weren't saying anything about it, because white silence is the killer. I believe that full-heartedly.
We moved past this impromptu, but I think it's important. An interesting poll on the criminal justice system. Half of Americans polled now say that the criminal justice system in the U.S. is biased against blacks. That's up 35% from 2 years ago. Gentleman way over here in the corner.
Hi, Greg from Montgomery County. I just wanted to talk about the, I think you're absolutely right. There's a serious problem with the administration of justice, and I think it comes back to the war on drugs and the inexplicable reason that we think as a society that we can legislate individual voluntary behavior. And if we change that, I think we'll see a lot of these problems go away.
Okay, let's go to Facebook right now on this issue. Got a lot of comments. Among them, Anthony Duncan says, you let the cops of the system chip away simple rights, and soon no one will have rights. Marie Brown weighs in. She says a discussion needs to take place on how to comply with law enforcement, how to teach respect for law enforcement. It's not about equal rights, she says. There is a distinct problem with how people are behaving when they encounter a police officer, law enforcement, she says. Anybody want to weigh in on that, Lenny?
Look, we can focus on law enforcement, but that is just the most toxic tip of this iceberg. Because when you go for a job and you are discriminated against, it's the same poison happening in a far more subtle form. When you go to rent an apartment or buy a home and discrimination takes place, it's the same poison, it's just more subtle than when there's a gun involved. So this is part of a larger systemic and institutional problem that we have to address. If we only focus it on law enforcement, then shame on us for not focusing on all the other issues that we have to deal with it. But we have to focus it on law enforcement because lives, black lives, do matter.
And also because police officers are in a unique category. They're the only ones who have the authority, the badge and the gun to take somebody's life. And in most cases, we're going to side with them that it was justified. It's an important right that they have. I say to my friends, and I got a lot of cop friends, and if I ever need a cop, I'm calling a cop, okay, and expecting that police officer to do his or her job. But I say to them, clean up your own act. Clean it up. When you got a bad apple, figure out how to get them out. D.C.'s police chief, Kathy Lanier, says she's got bad cops that she can't get rid of. She has to put them back in their jobs. Go ahead.
And it's incredibly problematic that we aren't really looking at the officer, particularly in the Sandra Bland instance. Now, black women have been sassy their whole lives. Snark is like a part of what we do. It just, and that's not to suggest at all that you got the angry black woman stereotype, you have the Jezebel stereotype, but literally what she said was, yes, the officer says, you got a problem? Is something wrong? You seem like you have attitude. Yes, I got attitude because you pulled me over for not using a signal. So you also have to think about the fact that that officer simply couldn't figure out how to get out of that situation. He couldn't figure out how to get out. He got deeper and deeper into it and wouldn't retreat.
You're saying what, that his
de-escalate.
training should have kicked in?
Yes,
absolutely.
or his humanity.
Right. Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, and that gets back to the point where the pathologies of not just privilege but flat out supremacy rule a lot of what we're doing here. I mean, this is what we're talking about. The way that the police systems are set up in this country go back to trying to catch slaves on the street who people presumed had escaped. I mean, this is the basic fundamentals of how we set up the policing systems in this country. And so if you think about how much that sort of gets into our mentality about who's doing right and who's doing wrong, it was interesting to hear your point about you're upset about the fact that people weren't talking about, Black Lives Matter amongst these people that were running for president, but you had a problem with the NWA commercial. Listen, I learned a whole lot more from NWA about the workings on the street than I'm ever going to learn from any politician. And to me, that was as important. But we think to ourselves, well, if they're not talking about it, it's not as big of a deal, which is part of that supremacy problem that we run into. It's hard for us to use our own agency to do what we think we need to do.
All right, hold on a second. Let's go to Charleston. Take a look at this.
Why did you do it?
According to authorities, 21-year-old Dylan Roof sat with his soon-to-be victims for an hour in a Bible study class, listening to them pray, watching them worship before gunning them down.
It's hard, and it's hard to explain to your children.
I'm mad, I'm hurt, I'm angry. I want to know why it happened.
Roof's childhood friend, Joey Meek, says he recently reconnected with Roof.
He had told me that the black people were taking over the country and that he wanted it to be segregation.
In addition to 9 counts of murder, Roof is also facing 33 federal counts, among them hate crime charges for the June massacre.
This is an unfathomable and unspeakable act.
We woke up today and the heart and soul of South Carolina was broken. And so we have some grieving too. And we've got some pain we have to go through.
Reverend Lamar is pastor of Metropolitan AME Church here in Washington, the sister church of Mother Emanuel in Charleston. Reverend, what have you seen since this?
Well, first of all, you can't take what happened in Charleston out of historical context. So that exact same church was burned down in the early 1800s when one of the members at a class meeting was trying to have an insurrection against the slave owners. And the white people in Charleston at that time were concerned because there were more Africans than whites, and they were brutal to the Africans, and they were trying to keep the Africans suppressed. What I want to say currently is that we continue to get people asking us questions, but they don't want to have the real dialogue, Bruce. They want to ask us, how's the church protecting itself? They don't want to talk about how Dylan Roof came into that space with the ideas that animated what it is that he did. And my friend here from the Republican Party, the truth of the current Republican Party, and I'm not a big fan of Democrats either, but the current Republican Party, the Southern strategy, engineered by Richard Nixon, was used to blow racial dog whistles, to rally white people, to roll back the very few legal remedies that came forth after the Civil Rights Movement. And they continue to trade on that continuously. So America needs, we must be willing to have these difficult conversations and stop with the smoke screens and the shields. We know that the narrative that is animating these spaces that continue to control black bodies, that narrative is old and it has not been broken, nor has it been challenged. It just recreates itself generation after generation.
Anybody surprised? Gentleman here.
Hello, my name is Sejin Choi, and I'm an intern at the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. These views are my own. I think that what I want to comment after seeing this racial discussion, which is truly inspirational, is that racial relations is not a black and white issue, and that there are other folks, other ethnic minorities that do take part in this discussion. And being an Asian American, being one of the few in the studio today, I think that it's very important for us to remember the Indian Temple shooting 4 years ago that resonates with me as much as it resonates with the Charleston shooting that happened a couple months ago. And also, there is racial discrimination against Asian Americans on a daily basis from police enforcement, in the military, Danny Chen dying of hazing this past year. So I think that it's very important for us to also remember to be inclusive of other voices when having these types of race discussions. And this goes back to the sentiment of the gentleman that spoke before, that all lives matter. I believe in the Black Lives Matter movement, but I think that we need to be able to be inclusive of different ethnic minorities, and that's why I would just like to take a step back and ask everybody in this room to embrace other voices that are not often heard on television or in the mass media.
Very well said. Can I ask people in the back there? Can we get a mic to the people back there? Just stand up. Stand up. Hold on a second. Identify yourself quickly for us.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Trish. I'm the immediate past secretary of the D.C. Republican Party. I don't mean to be disrespectful. I really don't. So please take it in the manner in which it's given. But African American, people of African American descent have had to live through 400 years of discrimination. We don't know where we come from. We don't know our names. However, those who have had the ability to come here by choice, they have that option. You can find out where you come from. You know what country of origin you come from. The vast majority of us in this room have to take a DNA test and hope that we can find out who we are and where we belong in the diaspora of African American history. So please, don't ask us to belittle, don't ask us to stop, don't ask us to include, because we have, if it had not been for our blood, sweat, and tears, this country would not be where it is right now.
Anybody else want to respond to that? While we're back there, the lady right there, stand up, please. No, right here in the front, right, you, yes. Go ahead. Your name, please?
Hi, my name is Gail Schnell. I'm a U.S. Army OEF veteran, as well as the president and CEO of Schnell Tech Solutions. And I just want to say that I respect each and every single person here and every single race. And we've all suffered some sort of injustice if you look in the past. Speaking from like the Asian American side, I know like for the Japanese, they've gone through concentration camps, and these are all of our ancestors. And I think the only way we're ever going to move forward is from learning from our past, learning from our mistakes, and moving forward together as a whole. I have a child, and one of his classmates asked him, "Are you Filipino?" And he said, "What's that?" And he's like, "Oh, are you from the Philippines?" And he said, "I'm American." And I hope that someday we can all think like a child and not see a color, not see a race. There's so many people right now that are, interracial couples that I'm hoping after a while we will stop the hatred and try to find all the ways that we can help each other out and be a better country by working together. Just like in the Army, we're made up from women and different races. And I've faced racism and I've faced, discrimination as being a woman, but I choose not to dwell on the negative and focus on the positive. And I put myself out there to try to help whoever I can, and I hope others can follow.
Thank you very much for that. We want to get as many people in as possible. Let's move around this way. Hold on a second. I want this gentleman right here. He's had his hand up for quite some time. Right here, and then I'll get back to you back there. No, hold on a second.
From Baltimore, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle.
Okay.
I think to the original point, the context of the conversation, why people are afraid to talk about race. We live in a society structured on the institution of racism and white supremacy, not in terms of people's feelings about, a particular race, but we're talking about institutions that benefit financially, economically, politically from undermining the humanity of people of African descent. And I think a part of what we need to think about is when we think about the criminal justice system, it's important to know that there are industries around profiteering off the suffering and miseries of our people, and that is a substantive impetus behind what we saw in Baltimore in terms of years of the institutionalized oppression of the people in those communities. Until we deal with that, then we're not going to actually deal with the substance of the problem that's in front of us.
Point well taken. We need solutions in Baltimore. I want to come right here to this gentleman right here with the glasses on. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say to my friend from the White House Initiative, as coming from a fellow Asian.
Hold on a second. I can't hear his mic. I need another mic on him. Another mic. Hand him another mic, please. Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say to my friend from the White House Initiative, as a fellow Asian American, specifically a fellow mixed Asian American, I think you really needed to hear what she said, because I think a lot of the way Asian American issues are framed is, hey, we experience this too, without ever saying not on the same scope and magnitude, right? But I also wanted to speak to a second point about reforming police and law. I think when we talk about reforms, we need to talk about fundamental reforms, and not just a reform here, reform there, because I think we're in a political system that gives us left versus right, and these are useful categories, but we need to be thinking bottom versus top.
All right, I got to get to the next segment, but I want to hear from the woman here because she's had her hand up for quite some time.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm an activist from DC. I just wanted to say really quickly, I think going back to the issues with Dylan Roof and the conversation that's brought up, I think one of the problems that I see with conversation and discourse that's come from that is that it's sort of derailed the conversation just on a personal level, because it's given people something to point to and say, no, that's racism. And that allows us to ignore the systematic and institutionalized racism that's really eroding very deeply the demographics of this country that are affected by them.
And it kind of reminds me of the lesson that President Obama gave us, just because you don't use the word, Okay, exactly. Good point. We want to move on. Take a look at this piece.
August 1st, Berryville, Virginia.
This is when we first opened our old store.
That's Ben Jones, former Democratic congressman from Georgia, but probably better known as Cooter.
Y'all ain't no doubt about it. You got big trouble here.
He's built a cottage industry off the character he portrayed in the early 1980s popular sitcom, The Dukes of Hazzard.
Never meaning no harm. Would you like your name on this too?
No, I just
want me to sign it?
Today, Ben Jones is the owner and major attraction at Cooter's Museum and Restaurant in Sperryville. But he's also leading a charge to save the Confederate flag.
We're not ashamed of our ancestors, and we're not ashamed of the symbols of their courage and their valor.
His crusade recently drew a persistent line of good old boy Duke fans and defenders of the flag to Cooters on a Saturday.
This is for my grandson.
When this flag has been used for hateful purposes, it's a desecration of that flag. And it has in the past. It's been misused, we know that, but so is the American flag, so is the Christian cross.
They feel outnumbered, maybe even betrayed by mainstream Southerners who are now openly reconsidering the legacy of slavery and its symbols.
There's so many people that died because of that flag, and just to remove it and pretend like the history didn't happen is wrong.
Don't take my flag. You know, this is who I am and where I came from. It's very important to me.
This is an easy target. The men who fought under this flag wasn't about defending slavery. Slavery was, something they had inherited. Now, it was an evil, but it was the American evil. I've always said that slavery was the national sin, not the Southern sin.
The massacre of black churchgoers in Charleston, South Carolina, by a young white man who is pictured brandishing the flag meant that flag had to go, said South Carolina's governor.
That flag, while an integral part of our past, does not represent the future of our great state. My hope is that by removing a symbol that divides us, we can move forward as a state in harmony, and we can honor the 9 blessed souls who are now in heaven.
We love those people too that was in that church and that died.
Why crucify everybody because of what 1 or 2 or maybe 4 people do? It doesn't make no sense.
Some here seem resigned to their flag coming down over state houses and some other tax-funded structures. If only it would stop there. Taking the Dukes of Hazzard off cable TV merely because the Confederate flag is painted on the sitcom's famous General Lee
is cultural cleansing. That's what it is. There's no other word for it.
And we've got Ben Jones here in the studio because this is such an important issue. Ben, take it from there. A lot of people here, want that flag removed from public space. You don't have a problem with that.
Well, it depends on the public space. I think that it is cultural cleansing. You got to remember a few things here. 70 to 80 million Americans are descended from the Confederacy. No one here got to fill out an application form when we came into this place. We didn't get to decide what color we were going to be, who our ancestors were. And in studying the turmoil of American history, I understand that indeed slavery, which was, it's not longer than America, started in 1619. White and black bondsmen came into Jamestown under the English flag from 1619 till 1776, under the American flag from 1776 until 1865. Those men thought that they were doing the right thing, and Lincoln in his first inaugural address makes it clear he has no problem with slavery. Now, that's a tough thing for people to get around, but if we really study history, we have to understand, first of all, the debt we owe to the African Americans, and I think that's clear. They did not, after 1865, have the same starting line as everybody else. But if we're going to move ahead, we have to find things, as Dr. King said. He had a dream that someday on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners would dine together at the table of brotherhood. We can't do these divisive things, making these broad brush characterizations of all of us,
but a question
without a reaction.
I got you. A question. Let's deal number one with the State House, taxpayer-funded structures.
Those are different arguments, and they should be taken on their merits. There had been a compromise in South Carolina that removed it from the Capitol Dome where it should not have been, put it at a Confederate monument. That deal is done, and yet, and I think folks here understand what I'm saying, every Confederate monument, every Confederate statue, every Confederate flag, every cemetery is now on a list. And there's, throughout this country, every day, it may not show up on the media, but our flags are being threatened, our heritage is being threatened, and we did not
and we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that. I want to split this up a little bit. Let's talk about the Confederate flag flying over public, and when I say public, I mean taxpayer-funded structures, buildings, poles, whatever. Young man here from Sperryville.
I believe the Confederate flag, it represents heritage. It's our heritage, and we're proud of it. We're not proud of what happened, far as the slavery, I do believe that is completely wrong and that should never have happened. But attacking our personal property...
Hold on, I want to get another mic because we need to hear this. Get him a good mic. Thank you. Go ahead.
I do not believe that slavery was a good thing, and I believe that this Confederate flag represents our heritage. Now, attacking our private property and what's on our vehicles...
Which is happening.
Yes,
These are
which
stories
is
I heard when I
happening
was
right
in
now.
Yeah.
And there was a gentleman on a street bike in Georgia, and there was a gentleman flying a flag on the back of his pickup truck. The gentleman on the street bike was African American, and he drove up beside this truck, jumped off of his street bike, and tore this flag off his truck and ended up dying. Now, I do not want to see this happen. This is very upsetting to me, and the fact that they're coming to our private property to take what is ours down, that is our heritage.
Can everybody agree that if he wants to fly the Confederate flag on his private property, that's his business?
No.
All right, come around this way. Come around this way. Marjorie Lightman, you disagree? Go ahead.
First of all, I want to know, what is the heritage that this flag represents? What is the Southern heritage distinct from the American heritage when you separate out the issue of slavery? What did the Confederacy do that was so distinct if it wasn't a slave state?
Slavery existed in every state in this country. It existed in every colony before that. Slavery, and if you'll read the book, The Half Has Never Been Told by Edward Baptist, you will come to understand, it built the American economy. It built Wall Street. Read the book Complicity by the editors of the Hartford Courant. That established that it was a Northern enterprise. What it was a bunch of people who went out in their time to defend their rights, what they felt were being threatened in that system.
And Bruce,
if you want to fight the Civil War here, no. Well, you're saying stupid things.
I'm not saying stupid things.
You are.
Nobody. I'm expressing an opinion.
But Ben, let me say this.
If
you read the documents of secession from the southern states,
I know the one you're talking about, Alexander Stephens.
No, not just the vice president of the Confederacy speech, but the states as they seceded, they were clear that it was about nothing other than slavery. It was clearly about slavery, and it was their determination. They wrote it themselves, that their culture was dependent upon slavery. And the eradication of slavery was the eradication of their culture and their property and all that they understood.
Let's go to Noel back here. Noel, you want to weigh in on this?
And I was going to add to that, we also have to understand that the Confederate flag didn't end with the Civil War. It was continued to be used for decades and decades as a symbol of hate. Birth of a Nation, one of our first feature-length film, that is what that movie is about. And it's also about the rise and glory of the Klan. We cannot separate the Confederate flag from racism. And in that way, we have to be very critical of its use. And I'm not saying we need to get rid of it completely, but I think it belongs in museums. Because as a historian, I think it's important that we
Scott Bolden quickly, and then we go over to the other side.
Let me just, when I hear my new friend, Ben Jones, my new friend here, you can't have it both ways. When I hear my new friend say that it's about Southern heritage and he doesn't support slavery and quotes Martin Luther King Jr., okay, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. The reality is that this is a symbol of hatred and death. And you know what? It shouldn't be on federal or state government buildings or locations. You want to put it in a museum? You want to put it in your house? That's fine, as far as I'm concerned.
I need to hear from Lenny. Then we got to move on. Come on, Lenny. Lenny Steinhorn.
Here's what I can't understand when I hear the phrase Southern heritage. That suggests that the South is simply white. It's not. The South is multicultural. In fact, if we were to talk about Southern heritage, wouldn't it make more sense to talk about Rosa Parks, to talk about the abolitionists in the South who fought against slavery? Why is this Confederate flag, which symbolized a nation that tried to continue and perpetuate slavery, the symbol of Southern heritage. That doesn't make any sense to me.
We got to move. We got to move.
I mean, I think there's more to be said here, though, which is the basic historical lesson, which was that the Confederacy was not some part of America. It was trying to leave America. I mean, and that's to be understood here. So when you just sort of subsume one into the other in a historical context, that's ahistorical. That's false. You know, and when you talk about atonement, I believe that there are a lot of people that do believe there is some concept of cultural heritage around shows like the one you were on, shows that I watched as a kid, in which that visual symbol means something different. But if you're going to go with atonement, ask the people whom were most affected. You don't get to just make the rules of your own atonement if you really actually care. You go to Germany, you don't see symbols like that about things like that because, well, I mean, there's a comparison from a symbolism standpoint. That's what I'm saying. From a symbolism standpoint.
You can say that about the American flag too. Ask the American Indians.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
Ask the American Indians who were destroyed.
If you're going to take atonement seriously,
I need your attention for a second here. We know that an awful lot of times some of the best comedians can say some of the things and get a laugh that we can't say to one another about this issue. Take a look at this tape.
God, I love being white. I really do. Seriously, if you're not white, you're missing out. Here's how great it is to be white. I could get in a time machine and go to any time, and it would be f***ing awesome when I get there. That is exclusively a white privilege. Black people can't f*** with time machines. A black guy in a time machine is like, hey, anything before 1980? No, thank you. I don't want to go. But I can go to any time. The year 2? I don't even know what's happening then. But I know when I get there, welcome, we have a table right here for you, sir. Thank you.
Now, you watch the TV, you watch like 60 Minutes and you see white people pissed off, man. Mad, the white man thinks he's losing the country. You watch the news like, we're losing everything. If y'all losing, who's winning? It ain't us. There ain't a white man in this room that would change places with me. None of you. None of you would change places with me, and I'm rich.
You make my point. Everybody's laughing. Reverend, what do you think?
Well,
okay.
Let me say this quickly. First,
we're past the flag. We're moving on. Okay.
We'll go past the flag,
right.
But it goes back to the whole white privilege thing. And that's the deal. When you looked at the film that you showed earlier about Rolfe, Dallin Rolfe, it was white privilege that he had when they took him to get a sandwich after they arrested him. But when you arrest a black person, they're getting handcuffed, hog-tied, and everything. So white privilege exists. And so when you talk about this idea that we'll do justice, until white people speak up truthfully and say reparations for blacks in America, because everybody that's been wronged in America has had reparations, and the white privilege that they have when you lock up our people and you don't treat them like you do.
Kimmy, thanks. Let's go to the gentleman.
Bikers.
Wait, I haven't heard from the gentleman right here with the hat on.
So my name's Alec. I'm an incoming law student at UMD.
Okay.
So white privilege is very real. And here's the thing. Louis C.K. said you can get in a time machine and go anywhere. Today, I can go anywhere on this planet, whether I'm pulled over by a cop, whether it's an apartment store, whether I'm walking down the street in a hoodie and an iced tea. I can go anywhere. I know that I'm going to be fine. Other people cannot do that. And that's what's important to understand. If you are black in this country, if you're Latino in this country, if you are not white, if you're not a man in this country, crazy things can happen to you. And that's the epitome of white privilege, is that I can do what I want and I'm going to be okay. And that can't always be said if you're not white.
I love what happens when we start talking to one another. Aaron, one of our really talented producers here, told me a story when we were rehearsing about a conversation she had with a black female colleague. Aaron, tell us about that conversation.
Hi, I was shopping and relaying this story to a black coworker, and I was kind of puzzled as to why I was in sort of a fancy upscale Bethesda store and no one talked to me, no one said, hi, how are you doing? No one greeted me. And my black coworker's response was, well, they don't think you're gonna steal. If I walk into the same store, they're gonna be like, hi, how you doing? Let me help you with this. They kind of tail them. And it never occurred to me that would happen. I just thought it was bad customer service and not, you know, someone profiling shoppers.
Okay, show of hands here. How many people are followed going into the store? How many people? Okay, let's see. Well, whatever. If you followed, you followed. You know what it is. Okay, we see a show of hands. The white gentleman in the back here has been followed. Talk to me. Stand up.
Oh, he needs a mic.
I need to get a mic over there to you. Why do you suppose they were following you?
Well, it was Christmas time, and I was going to a Toys for Tots party, and I wanted to get a toy. So I went to Toys R Us, and probably because I'm a man walking around a toy store, and I don't have a wedding ring on, I didn't have any kids with me, and I was kind of like reminiscing about like, going through the toy aisles, and because I hadn't been to Toys R Us in a long time.
Okay.
And one of the guys came up to me and said, "Excuse me, sir, can I help you?" Like gave me a dirty look.
Okay,
like,
I got it. I want to move. I want to move. Come here.
So.
Young lady right here. Right here. What about my colleague here? You want to talk? Go ahead. You got the mic.
Well, and I think that's the point, though. He was followed in the toy store because he looked out of place in the toy store, and we see people of color get followed in stores because people inherently assume that they're out of place. Why they couldn't be shopping in here? They must be stealing, and that's racism.
I got to ask you guys, okay, because we're running out of time here in terms of the broadcast. Solutions. Where do we go from here? We have to leave here, having moved the ball down the field a little bit. Let me start with you. What do you think?
And it actually dovetails with the conversation. It dovetails well, I think, with the conversation the part of the conversation that we were just having. One solution is to think about it in the context of what that comedian said in terms of no matter what time I go, wherever I go back, that's just absolutely not true. It's not true. If you go back far enough, if you go back to classical Africa, you don't exist. So if you begin to help us to recover what it was or what life looked like before race became an issue, and we stop the cultural cleansing, and we get historical accuracy, and we don't teach beginning with slavery in the U.S., and we begin to think about the world in terms of the world and not the white world, then it's a very different conversation because our point of departure is fundamentally different.
Solution. I'm looking for solutions.
No, that's the solution is to change the textbooks.
I need more solutions. I need more. Back here, Chris. We haven't heard from you in a while. Hurry up. We're running out of time. Solution.
Lots to talk about here.
No, but you don't have a lot of time.
We need movement, all right. Bruce. I think that Bruce, I think you've lost all your conservative viewers. I think this has been a very liberal program, which is fine. I think it's great when liberals talk to each other. However, if you want to shut down conservatives so they shut you off, they don't listen to you, talk about white supremacy, white privilege, etc. A lot of conservative, a lot of conservative whites out there don't even think that racism even exists. You got to go baby steps here, right? So that's So that's a big problem. So that's the first step. You want people to listen. You want to have a conversation with them, and so you've got to also.
You're trying to get the Republican Party to expand. What are you saying to your colleagues in the Republican Party to expand?
Oh boy.
To include minorities.
Yeah, it's a big problem because right now Donald Trump is tapping into a situation here.
They don't want to hear you tell me what you're saying to them about expanding, including
They
minorities.
don't want to hear it, a lot of it, yes.
Okay.
And it's a difficult thing for a lot of people to hear.
Okay. We have run out of time. An incredible conversation. We're going to continue it online. I'd like to thank all of you, and we certainly would like to thank all of you out there. Thanks for joining us, and we'll do this again sometime. I'm Bruce Johnson. Have a good night.
This program has been a special presentation by WUSA 9 and The Washington Post.
You've been watching Race and Honest Conversation with Bruce Johnson. Next, a live special edition of MPT's Direct Connection. We'll expand on the issues of race in American society, and we will take your questions, too. You can call us at 800-926-0629, and you can tweet us a question. Our Twitter address is @MPT News. Again, you can add your voice to the discussion at 800-926-0629 or @MPT News on Twitter. Direct Connection starts now.
Direct Connection is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you. Live from Maryland Public Television, this is Direct Connection with Jeff Salkin.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Direct Connection. Our thanks to WUSA 9 and the Washington Post for the chance to rebroadcast their program this evening. Joining us now in the studio are Sherilyn Ifill, president of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and Michael Higginbotham, law professor at the University of Baltimore, author of Ghosts of Jim Crow, Ending Racism in Post-Racial America. I just happen to have a copy of it here. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you, Jeff.
After the last hour of programming we've listened to, do you want to rethink the post-racial America?
That should be in quotation marks there. We're not there yet.
Explain the phrase. What does that mean and where are we?
Post-racial means that race is no longer significant in terms of opportunities afforded or in terms of hardships endured in our society today. We're clearly not there yet. Race is still a significant factor. I hope that one day we will be there, but we're not there yet.
Sherilyn, where would you say we are on that path? And has there been, sorry to interrupt so early, has there been some backsliding maybe in the last year or two?
You know, I think it really depends on when you start counting. And I actually don't start counting until 1954, when the Supreme Court decided Brown versus Board of Education. I always refer to the United States as it relates to race and equality as a teenager. We're really quite young. We were essentially an apartheid state for the 100 years before that. And it's only with Brown versus Board of Education and then the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that we even began to, at least legally, imagine ourselves as a society where race did not define where you could go, where you could sit, what you could do, how you were educated, and so forth. And if you think about it that way, if you think about just that 61 years, we're really quite young. And we're really quite early on the path. And I think sometimes we get impatient with ourselves because we have an image in our head of America as this place of equality, as though that's what it's always been. But it's actually a very recent vintage. And a lot of what I think are experiencing right now are the growing pains of progress. And so the progress, for example, of having elected an African-American president brings with it certain kinds of growing pains. And some of what it has brought is a kind of anger and a kind of petulance and a kind of confusion by some members of the white community. It maybe brought too much hopefulness by some members of the African-American community who thought we might be post-racial. I think it's normal, but it is painful.
I read that Thurgood Marshall in '54, after he won, thought that it would be about 5 years and that we would be post-racial that soon.
Well, what he thought was that it would be 5 years to integrate the schools, because he also thought that the Supreme Court would, having ruled that segregation was unconstitutional, would require the immediate integration of schools. But as we all know, the Supreme Court didn't do that. A year later, in 1955, they decided the Brown 2 case, in which they said, basically, we'll give Southern jurisdictions the time they need to make this happen. And what happened in that period was massive resistance, was an organized effort by Southern leaders, politicians, members of Congress to, at all costs, resist the Supreme Court's decision in Brown versus Board of Education. And I think Marshall could not have anticipated that.
I have a full bank of phone calls, a lot of tweets we want to get to, but I think we need to more fully hear your views before we do that. So give me a picture going forward, best case scenario. Everything goes right. Government does the right thing. People do the right things. How do we get to where we want to be in the next decade or two?
Well, I think there's 3 things we need to do. First and foremost is to recognize we still have a problem. As Sherilyn indicated and others have said, a lot of people think that we are post-racial already, that we've already arrived. And so I think we really need to recognize that we have a problem. Once we do that, I think we need to empower our minority communities. Tremendous racial disparities exist today, not only in the criminal justice system, but in schools, in employment, in the political arena, in voting rights. And so we need to reduce and eliminate those disparities. We can do that with passing laws like having a Job Creation Act, Job Education, Job Training Act. We can do that. We can do it in the educational arena as well, and also the employment arena. But third, and I think most significantly, we need to equalize our society. Integration.
From an economic standpoint.
Not only from an economic standpoint, but throughout the society, in terms of housing, in terms of schools. integration, diversity is such an important educational tool. I lived in integrated neighborhoods all my life, and I learned a lesson that I think not enough Americans learn today, and that is that good and bad people, that smart and dumb people come in all colors. And when you live in an integrated environment, you see it on a daily basis. And so it's not a big deal to be able to refute disparities that to be able to refute stereotypes that we see every day in this society.
That's a really interesting point. I mean, the percentage of people, I can't even guess what it would be, who live in a reasonably integrated world. Not the case in Sandtown, Winchester. Not the case in other parts of Baltimore City that are close to 100% white.
Well, I think that you have hit the nail on the head, as has Michael, which is that too often we think that the issue of race and racism is just about feelings. In fact, I think that's what many of us were taught when we were young, that it's about mean, terrible people who are racist and the other good people who are not racist. And while that is also true, that there are some mean, terrible people who are racist, and there are certainly good people who are not, the truth is that racism manifested itself through a series of policies and laws and investments. And those policies, laws, and investment produced the society that you're describing, this incredibly hyper-segregated society. It's not just about whether or not somebody wants to live next to a black person. That's part of it. But a lot of it is really the investments that we made as a society, investments that were created, frankly, and developed by the federal government, especially in the housing realm. It was the federal government that, beginning in the 1930s, required racially segregated housing when they started providing mortgage insurance. It was the federal government that gave the tax subsidies to the creation of all-white suburbs. They insisted that those suburbs be all white when they supported Levittown and the other suburbs that were created around the country in the 1950s. It was the investment in the interstate highway system that made those white suburbs possible. Now we have to ask ourselves the question, when we then realize that we want to have an integrated society, and we passed the Fair Housing Act of 1968, have we made the same level of investments on the other side? That is, the same level of investments to create an integrated society that we made to create a segregated society? And the answer is no. And that's why Baltimore still looks the way it does. And that's why the concentrated segregation that we see in places like Baltimore still exists all over the country in the North.
I mean, there's no rewriting history. There's no unwinding from legal segregation all the way back to slavery. It is what it is. You
only solve it by going forward with new investments, right? Think about, I mean, I just gave the example of the interstate highway system. I think many people think that that's a great thing. I'm on I-83, I'm on 695. Yeah, exactly. I'd still be winding down some country road right now. So we're all happy about it, right? But what they did was, it was a decision to make what we now recognize as kind of middle-class America. The white suburbs was something that was created after World War II. We created a GI Bill because we wanted to give these returning soldiers, most of whom were not highly educated, an opportunity to become what we call middle class. In other words, we make a decision about the society we want to see, and then we make investments in that society. So if we are serious about wanting to see a society that is racially integrated, that is economically integrated, then we'll make the kinds of investments that we made in the 1950s.
And to do it in a fair and equitable manner, because many of the things that were done in the past, like the GI Bill, were administered in a racially discriminatory manner. So the opportunities were there for some. They should have been there for everyone. And because of practices and policies that were racially discriminatory, many individuals didn't get a chance to take advantage of those opportunities.
Let's hear from some callers. Baltimore City, this is Ralph. Ralph, thanks for the call. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hello.
I believe this, and I believe this in only one way. To straighten this city out and to keep this city alive. Baltimore's a great city. I love it. I've only been here 40 years, and I've been here under Schaefer and Petrosack and some other mayors. But I think this city can grow into the best city in the country. But first, we have to educate the people. We've got to stop, and you hit it on the nail on the head. You said we got to, all the whites and all the blacks got to hold hands. Clean up these neighborhoods. Get a broom out and sweep these neighborhoods. Get the cocaine, the drugs out of the neighborhood.
Ralph, thank you very much for the phone call, because it brings up a couple of interesting points. One is economic disparities in the African-American community. I mean, is racism Is the level of racism experienced at different strata economically a different thing, in your view?
Well, I think the disparities are widespread today, and unfortunately, they're getting worse. And I think that's one of the real issues when you ask, have we made progress? Yes, certain progress has been made, but one of the things that is really frightening is that this progress has been made, but it's an ebb and a flow, and now we've been going back. And as Cheryl Lynn said, it depends on when you look at the start date. Recently, the disparities have been getting wider, and that's what we see in Baltimore. Unemployment rate in Sandtown, Winchester, and other communities, you're talking about 33% unemployment. When you have those significant levels, you're going to have conflicts.
Look, it's a very complicated problem, and the caller hit on several of the pieces that make it so complicated, right? He talked about, getting the drugs out of the neighborhood. I think we're now coming to a national recognition across party lines, across racial lines, that our war on drugs, not only has it not worked, but it has actually harmed us. It's actually harmed communities by criminalizing so much behavior and creating this kind of prison culture that has really embedded itself into so many of the communities that we see around Baltimore. So there's already some effort to begin to address that. We recognize that's part of the problem. Then there's the education problem, which is, by the way, not disconnected from the housing segregation problem. Because what you need in order to make our educational system work is the same thing you need to make our neighborhoods work. We need mixed income housing. We need mixed income schools. We participated in a case challenging, suing HUD for segregated public housing in Baltimore. And that case settled in 2011. And what we showed in that case was the effect of deeply distressed communities on children. That is, not just communities where there's some poor people, but communities where everyone is poor, communities where there is concentrated violence, and the kind of trauma that this inflicts on young people and affects their life outcomes. You cannot expect that child who's experienced that trauma, who lives in this deeply distressed community with this stress all around them, to then walk into a classroom and be prepared to learn and be prepared to sit in their chair and be prepared to participate and be prepared to be positive. So all of these pieces are interconnected, and if we actually want to get our hands around it, it's, with all due respect, I understand what the caller means. It's not going to be as simple as getting a broom out. It's going to require us taking all of our most creative ideas in all of the various sectors, economic, housing, education, criminal justice, and coming to bear and bearing down on that problem with the best ideas we have.
The challenges of racism and racial issues concern people in communities all across our state. Here now is MPT's Charles Robinson.
According to experts, how we see race can be divided into three categories. It includes housing, education, and policing. West Baltimore and Roland Park are miles apart and might as well be worlds apart. A pair of perspectives from two authors and residents. First up is Dwight Watkins, whose pen name is D. Watkins. He chronicles his upbringing in Baltimore, traversing a drug culture, obtaining a Master of Fine Arts from Johns Hopkins, teaching college, and becoming a columnist. He is the author of The Beast Side.
There's different neighborhoods you can go through in Baltimore City and not see a black face. And in certain neighborhoods you can go to in Baltimore and not see a white face unless it's a police officer or a teacher or something like that. So the divide is real. There's a couple of places where the races cross paths, but social relations aren't where they need to be at in 2015.
You could live your life very nicely as a white person in Baltimore and not see much of race. The way the city is configured, the way the transportation system is configured, you could come into the city to the theater, to the museums, and go right back out without going through the neighborhoods. So I think there wasn't as much conversation about race between the races as you might have had in some other cities.
Dr. Parks, who teaches at the University of Maryland, says this interest in a conversation about race is a sign of the times.
Right now is a moment of opportunity for Baltimore. There's a lot of attention from across the world in Baltimore. I spoke recently with a woman from Brazil who had watched it on television and who knew exactly what she thought was going on in Baltimore. And so I think that attention brings with it opportunity. It also brings opportunism. And I think we have a danger of people jockeying for position to speak for Baltimore in ways that Baltimore doesn't need. We don't need a spokesman. We don't need a leader. We need all of these voices to come to the front.
Assessments are one thing, but despite their age differences, both see positives coming out of the conversation.
I'm super optimistic because I work hard every day to try to do my part. Like, I understand that the changes that I would like to see won't come in my lifetime, but I know I'm doing my part to lay the foundation down so some younger people can pick up the torch and have a bigger impact and it can spread.
Baltimore has become symbolic across the world. Protesters across the world are saying, we are Baltimore. And so that means that this attention means that this is a moment where change could actually and finally come. But it also means that there is, I think, some energy to, quote, get back to normal, to get back to the old status quo, which means the problems were still there, we just pasted over them, we didn't talk about them. And I think cultures are systems, and people try to self-correct, and that is the self-correction, to get back to the old ways with the old types of power. And I think this is a moment where Baltimore really could show that it has a heart and can show that there's intelligence on the ground.
There is a lot of energy being exerted about what to do next. However, circumstances beyond the control of traditional leadership may direct the narrative. In Baltimore, I'm Charles Robinson.
Charles, thank you. Here's a tweet I'd like to get your thoughts on. How would you explain the existence of racism in this day and age to those who honestly believe it does not exist?
Well,
largely white folks, I would assume.
I think there's two types of racism, and people need to be aware of both. There's cultural racism, that's sort of the prejudices, the values that individuals have. It's the very traditional aspects of people say, I don't like someone because they're a certain race. And clearly that exists today in some segments, in some areas, in some individuals. Clearly that exists. There's plenty of examples of people getting out of swimming pools. I talk about it in my book, Ghosts of Jim Crow, of kids getting out of swimming pools, of white kids getting out because black kids came. That's just some of the stuff that happened during Jim Crow. Of people moving out of neighborhoods because blacks move in, whites moving out of neighborhoods, a practice that existed during Jim Crow. So that continues to go on, maybe not to the same extent that it did during Jim Crow, but it continues. But there's also structural racism, disproportionate impact of policies and laws and practices, disproportionate impact on racial minorities. Whether you're talking about voting, ID laws that have a disproportionate impact, whether you're talking about criminal justice practices like racial profiling, which has a disproportionate impact, those things exist today. And so what I would say to the caller is, the eye cannot see what the mind does not comprehend. And so it's very important to look at what's going on today and be able to recognize that, and not to turn a blind eye to these things.
Sherilyn, your thoughts on that, from the perspective of somebody who writes a tweet thinking that people see, well, we have a black president, we have African-American law professors and authors. What's the problem?
Well, I don't think I could improve very much on what Michael just said. I guess I would say this. I would really turn the question back on the tweeter, which is, tell me how you know it doesn't exist. I do think that,
if you're white, it's which the tweeter was not, by the way.
Yeah.
Is it harder to understand?
I think it is because of what actually someone on the segment you just showed talked about. If you just talk about like a place like Baltimore, because of this structural racism that Michael talked about, and because of the weight of this history, our society is organized in a way that if you are a white person, particularly at a certain socioeconomic level, you actually don't have to encounter it. You don't have to see it. You don't have to experience it. Then you add to that the reality that so much of the success of the civil rights movement is that overt expressions of racism, actually until very recently, were regarded as socially unacceptable. So racism in some ways went underground when you hear people talking about implicit bias. Look, if I walk into a room or you walk into a room, we assess the room immediately. Not with our conscious mind, but with our unconscious mind, right? I look, I assume you're a man, I assume he's a man, I assume he's African American, I assume you're white. But you know, it could turn out that actually you're Latino, or he could be Latino, right? But I've made a set of assessments that I just do automatically and that every person does. The question is your mind open to having that immediate reaction changed? Are you so embedded in your stereotype, in your belief about what somebody looks like and what that means about who they are and how smart they are and how moral they are and so forth? Or is your mind open? Because at the moment that you suddenly start speaking to me and saying, Sherilyn, no, in fact, I am Latino, but right, my mind has been changed. And I think we have to recognize that part of it is what we see in our society. It's structural. Part of it is explicit racism, but part of it is also this implicit racism that we carry in us and that many people carry in them and hold on to and refuse to have changed by just facts and reality and engaging with human beings.
And it's such an important aspect of what judgments do we make. There's nothing wrong with recognizing someone's race. There's nothing wrong with that. But what judgments do we make once we recognize? Do we attach negativity
Let's
or
grab
positivity?
some phone calls. Berkeley County, West Virginia. This is Janet. Janet, thank you for holding. Go ahead.
Yes, I had to move out of Baltimore. I was in Baltimore for 6 years. I'm married. I have 3 little boys who are 9, 7, and 5. And I got tired of being looked at like we were animals. I'm an educated Muslim woman, University of Florida. And this is the worst place I think that I have ever been to was Baltimore. I've never seen anything like it. And like I said, my father was in the military for 20 years, and we traveled all over, and it just got to be too much. I get more love here in West Virginia than I ever did in Baltimore, and it's a shame.
So you made that decision for the sake of your kids?
Yeah, I had to for the sake of my family because I just felt like we were not going to prosper in Baltimore.
Interesting. So glad you called. Janet, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thoughts on that?
I think it speaks for itself. I mean, she talked about how she felt perceived, and I think that that's part of why we need to have these conversations. I think many of us at various times in our journey here have experienced precisely what the caller described.
Stafford County, Virginia. This is Eddie. Eddie, thank you for the call. Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I want to really stress is that we have to really understand that racism in America is also based on profiteering. And one of the biggest things that we have to look at is our penal system and how it is allowed to perpetuate itself in the black community. There is money involved in allowing certain things to take place in Baltimore. One of the things I want to stress about Baltimore, that most blacks in that so-called riot situation in Baltimore, the buildings that they were burning down, tearing down, was insured by people outside of the community. There was money to be made as of those buildings being destroyed. So people were sitting back saying, okay, don't send nobody in. Let them tear my building down, because you know why? They're making me money. And all those young blacks in Baltimore did not understand at that point in time they were being pimped by other entities outside of their community. One thing we have to understand about Baltimore and all the major cities in America, blacks don't own anymore. We do not own. We don't own things anymore. We lease, we buy, we rent, but the problem is that we don't own things. And one of the reasons I think that what you saw explode in Baltimore the way it did was that the young people in Baltimore don't feel they have an investment in Baltimore. They don't feel that they are part of that community.
Sir, thank you very much for the phone call. Let's take one other Baltimore City. Clarence. Clarence, thank you for the call. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm calling because there is a video called The Journey of Man, which explains the origin of the human race, and I'm wondering why nobody's discussing this video.
Clarence, give it to me in 20 seconds.
Oh, the video discloses that the origin of the human race is Africa. They've even tracked back to the tribe, the original tribe of modern man.
Thank you very much for the phone call. Was he heading for we're all African Americans, I suppose?
Well, I'm not familiar with the video he's talking about, but I do think there's two things that are important in terms of what the callers mentioned. One is that we get our history accurate. You know, that we're accurate in the portrayal of our history, whether it's American history or world history. Second aspect is we have to empower our minority communities. And I think the caller mentioned that many don't feel a part of the community. We have to empower people. We have to give them hope. We have to give them opportunities. And whether it be educational opportunities, business opportunities, employment, we need to give people hope and opportunity. And many of Many of the individuals in Baltimore don't feel that right now.
I think I'm down to a minute or so, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening in the civil rights movement. You're a part of it. Also, Black Lives Matter, and how you see that dynamic.
Well, I think we're in this really wonderful and really critically important moment in this country. Really began with the death of and the killing of Trayvon Martin, and which I think really laid the foundation that then exploded after Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson last year and has continued. And all over the country, we see young people demanding to be seen, recognizing themselves, very bright young people who are proclaiming that their lives matter, that the lives of African American people matter. And they are saying that in a provocative way and in a loud way so that America can hear it. And what it has produced, and we have to be honest about what it's produced, is it's produced attention to a problem that my organization and many others have worked on for decades, which is the issue of police-involved killings of unarmed citizens, and particularly unarmed African-American citizens. This is something that people have not wanted to talk about. We have litigated in this area. We have advanced this issue. But now it's seen all over the country. So America's paying attention.
We are out of time to pay attention, but we're going to continue at mpt.org/live for the next few minutes. Callers, please hold on. Everyone else, thanks for joining us. Have a good night.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.
With the screening.
They've been pretty decent calls.
Continuing on live now at mpt.org/live and YouTube. Sherilyn Ifill, Michael Higginbotham. Let's continue to take some phone calls on the topic of race. Joining us from Prince George's County is Dale. Dale, thanks for the call. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I used to be an EEO rep when I was in a union, and I always found in the cases that I dealt with that the basic problem was that discrimination, racism was fun. And I tried to do what I could to make it painful for the perpetrator, but I never came to a good solution. And I really think that's what we've got to do. And I was wondering, how do we make racism, discrimination painful for the perpetrator?
Interesting question. Thank you very much.
Well, it's one that I talk about in my book, Ghosts of Jim Crow, in terms of solutions. One of the things we need to do is we need to get tough on discrimination. And that means serious penalties when people discriminate. And also we need to identify it as, perhaps a criminal act rather than just a civil penalty. And so we need to get tough. We say, we're tough on a whole lot of things in this society. We need to be tough on discrimination so that people that actually commit the acts are
like
adequately
employment
punished.
discrimination or housing discrimination.
Housing, all of it.
But part of the problem is we don't even, in our law, create enough room to acknowledge that the act exists, right? It's not just about the penalty. The truth is that, what we increasingly discover, most judges are hardwired not to believe a story of discrimination. In fact, I think because they don't want to believe it, because they haven't been exposed to it. I think that, many people are addicted to black and white television and a sheriff with a hat and a hose, and that's what discrimination looks like. And if it looks like a perfectly nice person, there's a lot of effort to accept any other possible explanation that there could be besides the one that's staring them straight in the face. So one of the things we need to do, I think, is to really re-educate ourselves and to engage ourselves in understanding and have our judiciary really understand what is discrimination, what does it look like, how does it manifest itself, and then believe it when you see it.
You've written about the importance of having a diverse judiciary. I'm thinking about the Freddie Gray case where we have an African-American judge, which shouldn't matter, right?
It shouldn't.
But everybody's probably pleased that we have
one of the things I wrote about is that diversity on the bench, it's not just about the decisions that the judge makes, it's about how that judiciary as a whole is perceived by the public, right? Because people want to see that a judiciary is inclusive. It also happens to be true that having a diverse judiciary can produce different results in that. At least it can produce different conversation as you get to the result, in that it allows different perspectives to come to the table. That's not only true of racial diversity, it's true of gender diversity, it's true of background diversity. What did that judge do before they ever became a judge? What kind of law did they practice? What's their background? So I think that diversity is important in this particular instance and in Baltimore City, because you want the public to have a sense of confidence that when they look at the judiciary, no group is barred from participating in making these critical decisions that are going to affect our community.
Let's grab one more phone call. Baltimore City, this is Alma. Alma, thank you for holding. Go ahead.
Yes, and I disagree with that. I think they need to have some barriers. As far as emancipation proclamation, that was already taken care of. And so blacks don't have to go through a lot of the turmoil that we went through in years past. But I think what's happening is they're using that as a crutch to try to promote different things. I'm going to the rappers. They could put all kinds of garbage that represents the black community and saying this is what the black culture is all about, drugs, thugs, making money, killing, shooting. This and people look back, oh, that's art. You know, at once upon a time, you can ban that kind of garbage from coming through our airways. I put censors on that kind of music. Whereas now, everybody has a blind eye. They want to slide it under art and say it's okay. And then when it's practiced in the community and you...
Oops, almost still there. Just getting going. Any thoughts?
Well,
I didn't follow all that. I apologize.
I didn't either, but except that we've seen this before. One of the problems that we have in dealing with racial discrimination and inequality in our country is that we have a discipline problem. We can't keep our eye focused on the problem. And so we start letting our mind drift into all kinds of other issues that may be issues that should be talked about. If she has a problem with rap music, that's certainly entirely appropriate to talk about. But you know, that's not actually the issue we're talking about today. And it doesn't mean that we now, let's talk about everything that's related to black people and everything that's related to white people. It requires discipline because it's hard. And I think that's why we move off topic. We move off topic because it's uncomfortable, because it makes us uncomfortable, because it seems like an intractable problem and we don't know what to do. And so we start looking around the edges for these other things that we feel more comfortable talking about and that we feel like we can get our hands around. And I think that hopefully what will happen out of this past year is that America can develop, at least for some period of time, a sense of discipline, a sense of willingness to really grapple with perhaps the one problem that's on the table, the issue of police-involved violence, or the issue of segregation. Let's get our hands around one of these problems and use all of our energy to try and solve it.
I did think the caller was struggling with identifying some of the positive aspects that blacks have contributed to this country, and clearly there's a great history here. A lot of times it's overlooked, it's undervalued, and I think it's very important that the truth of our history and of black participation and struggle and accomplishment in this society is accurately portrayed.
Professor's delighted you could come in. Really appreciate it. No, it was a long drive. And Michael, in your case, the book Ghosts of Jim Crow, Ending Racism in, quote, Post-Racial America, end quote. Michael Higginbotham, nice to see you. Have a good night.
Thank you.